really, but WX or the TK bindings are both very mature bindings that I've seen a lot of really nice apps done and have built apps myself in. And there we are. So this is a weird situation for me to be in, is that these are the things I'm recommending. I'm not recommending to my students and other people who say, oh, I want to write an X app, that you go out and invest the effort in building a giant pile of C or C++ on top of GTK or Qt. Now maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe everybody in the room is convinced that this is still the way to do apps. But I think the problems we have are such that I don't think there's much we can do about it. This is the stuff I believe. I mean, you can read it. I don't have to read it aloud to you. But right now, things are too hard, and we really need to make it better. We really need to make it easier. And the open questions are, first of all, is programming language the right thing to even think about? Yeah, give me 2 more minutes. Is programming language even the right thing to think about? The answer might be no. Everybody in here might be convinced, and they might be able to convince me that really my concern with programming languages is stupid here. You can write Fortran in any language, so go pick your favorite language and go. But if so, if you believe that it is, how weird can the language be? I've had big fun writing GUI code in Haskell, but I'm not convinced that it's the language I'm going to try to push on the rest of the world. How do we interoperate both with the code below you, FFI, and with the code above you, right, when you're writing toolkits? Which features does matter? I could give you a whole talk about why I think maybe object-oriented programming doesn't matter as much in writing applications as people think it does, and I could give you examples. What is it we're really looking for in a programming language? And what are the requirements? What is it we really need out of our programming language and programming tools to make application programming work? I would argue that maybe stability over time. One of the reasons people use Qt and GTK is that a lot of it in both platforms hasn't changed over a long period. And that's really nice to not have to be rebuilding your apps against the latest and greatest thing. Having watched people in the Microsoft world do this a few times in the last few years, I'm quite convinced it's a feature. Maybe cross-platform, maybe not, don't know. And by cross-platform, I don't necessarily mean just the broader cross-platform of Windows, Linux, Mac. It might just mean cross-platform in terms of being able to support the kinds of graphics hardware and input hardware that we have across the weird world that we have. Is portability to mobile important? Is portability to the web important? It would be really nice a lot of times to be able to have apps that ran all these places. But that's really hard. So what are we going to do in terms of programming languages to do it? Is being able to do fully 3D apps a big deal? 2.5D apps? What kind of speed and rendering quality requirements do we really have, right? These are some of the questions you folks can provide answers in terms of what's capable, but what do I really need to get work done at the end of the day? And the last question that I think is really an open question is, are we really just along for the GTK plus Qt ride anyhow? It was hard enough to make a start at replacing Xlib. It's really taken 10 years to get to the point where XCB is an accepted alternative to Xlib, and it's probably going to take another 10, if ever, before Xlib really goes away. Is it even worse with GTK and Qt, and is the whole thing moot, and we're stuck with C whether we want it or not? And so those are the questions I have. The other question is, what questions should I be asking? What have I missed? What questions do you have? And, what can we do about all this? This is a shorter talk probably than the topic deserves, or a longer one or the other. But, hopefully I've at least raised some questions in your mind and made you think about it. As somebody who really would love to develop more GUI apps myself, who's been doing it for 25 or 30 years and would love to be doing more of it today, as somebody who has students who are constantly excited about building GUI apps, I find it super frustrating that where I am is telling them, oh yeah, you should probably develop that for Android because, that's where the GUI app development's happening these days. If we're going to save the desktop, and don't fool yourself, it's in trouble, we need to solve the problem of how we're able to build apps. And I think maybe programming languages is a big piece of it. So those are my thoughts. It's just a bunch of random thoughts. Anybody got any questions or comments?
Firstly, I'd like to say, before I head on to anything, this is definitely the right approach and a noble thought. But like when I was young, when we started, the difference between me and my peers was like even while I was using probably Windows XP or 98, I was trying to tweak it, probably get a different boot screen and show it off. So when I progressed and I switched to the Linux world, it said if you're using Linux, you get some geek cred, if you know what I mean.
You get some geek cred? Yes, yes.
Yes. So the difference comes, everyone's using Windows, I'm using Linux, I get some geek cred. So things will obviously be easier in some other part of the world. But as you said, there must be someone who's developing a C++ app for mobile. There's definitely someone who's doing that. But what we're missing out over here is, after making a C++ app for mobile, the experience, the feel that you get after being able to do so is totally different than being able to do it in Python or Java or probably something very easier. I feel this is the right way, but you're missing out on a different level of community, and you're missing out, as you said, people in this room, what they feel and what the experience is to actually be able to do something which is totally difficult, which people normally are not able to do. And definitely it'll attract more audience, more users, but it'll also make us lose the exclusivity, the feel of being ex-developers, being a part of this community, and not being just another developer who's doing just another web app.
Well, yeah, okay. Those are good points. I mean, I think there will always be things for people to do that are technologically at the top of the curve around application development for the desktop. I mean, I don't think that's going to go away somehow magically any more than it has in the last 30 years. The problem is that right now we have no ramp. You know, the ramp up to being an application developer is a cliff, pretty much. You have to master an incredibly large amount of incredibly difficult things before you can build something that does anything and does it right. And you know, I say incredibly difficult. Obviously, it's not incredibly difficult for most of you, but I mean, trust me, I deal with students, I deal with developers from other places. If the norm is to do something that involves a reasonable amount of intellectual effort and a reasonable amount of knowledge, then people will at least get started. And that's more than we're getting right now. You know, go look at the number of new, interesting X applications. Forget, you know, everything else that have been built in the past 5 years. It's a pretty small number because it's hard. And I think that's one of the reasons, is because it's hard. I think the programming language is part of what's making it harder. Yeah, I get a different feeling when I build apps. I've built apps in a lot of things. And yeah, I get a different feeling when I build apps in C++ or C. But for me, it's not a happy feeling. It's the feeling of, oh my gosh, yes, I'm very smart to have done this, to have been able to do this, but not very smart to have done it. And I think that, you know, anyone who isn't having that feeling, well, just do it a few more times and then you'll be with me.
No, I tried to make an application in Qt with Qt Creator, and that actually worked pretty nicely. They have a lot of demos you can use. You can just copy it and then get something working real fast. Yeah,
the whole thing of automated code generation does solve some problems, in particular GUI code creation. It creates some others, though. I mean, yes, I can get a skeleton up and get a little bit of App Engine behind it, but at some point, you know, what the code generator is capable of doing runs out. And my experience with a whole bunch of GUI creators is that because I don't understand what's going on very well under the hood, I've just traded to some extent one set of problems for another. And it might be the new set of problems is smaller, but it's still there. The problems I have now are, oh, I want this to do something different than the code generator expected. What do I do? How can I hack it up? You know, can I even hack up the generated code without running into maintainability issues from heck? How's the layout going to scale? Go grab from any, I don't care the one, pick anything. Go create a GUI application with a design size that's small and then scale it the window bigger, or make one with one that's big and then scale the window smaller and watch what happens. The experience you'll get is very different from ones where you've carefully handcrafted the layouts and the layout policies so that everything works in that situation. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of semantic work. It's like real programming, but I think it's probably one of the features of this.
Actually, that was you and Matthias also.
Yeah, sorry, whoever first. It's all good.
How much of the advantages that you pointed out, web apps and mobile apps have, are at least partially based on that there's only a few years that we've had them, but we've had a desktop stack for over 20 years with different hardware changing over 20 years, still trying to support hardware from 10 years ago. Building Android. If you look at building Android apps, for example, you already have to worry about which version of Android are you running, what size display is it going to be, and so on and so forth. The iOS apps are facing the same thing now. In about 10 years' time, they may be running in the same issues we have now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't mean to claim that it's all just our fail. I mean, all these things I listed on the first slide about why it is that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's absolutely right, that, you know, more platforms is harder, more legacy is harder. But and I think you're right. I think the book is still open on what will happen there. But I will claim that designing your abstractions in a language that actually supports modularity and abstractions, and designing your abstraction layers in a language that actually promotes safe, correct, workable code will probably be some leverage for them, just like it's been so far. You know, looking at Android apps written in Java, which is my biggest experience in the mobile platform, yeah, you have to pay attention to how things are going to lay out, et cetera, in that environment. But it's typically, you know, tens of lines and hours of work rather than thousands of lines and weeks of work to figure out what's going on. And yes, the space so far is still very narrow compared to the space of hardware we want to run X apps on. There's no arguing that. But yeah, I think you know, I don't know the answer, right? Obviously, I don't know the answer. But I can't believe that making me make sure all my pointers are correct and my memory is actually there when I go to reference it, and that sort of thing is helping. I can't believe that, you know, having untyped, wacky interfaces that are done by header file inclusion and can't be statically checked very much is helping. I can't believe that having a lot of stuff linked in really funny ways that are likely to cause linking surprises is helping. I mean, all these are things, you know, I can't believe that having 10 million compile flags that you have to get just right to do anything going is helping. I mean, all of these are things that I watch students struggle with every day. It's just a small fraction, but it's all these are the things I watch students struggle with every day. And those accidental difficulties overwhelm the fundamental difficulties, I think, right now for X application developers. And so, you know, my claim is that we ought to at least tackle those and then see how bad it is after that. And I think so far we're not doing that very well. I mean, somebody said they threw together a Qt application with Qt Creator. I mean, have you looked at what comes out? Right? I mean, this is a lot of very complicated code that's run through a special pre-compiler before it's run through the C++ compiler, and the C++ compiler is already hard to understand and use, and then it's linked in very, very funny ways to try and get it all to work. You're probably going to end up having to build some really complicated build infrastructure to get it to compile, and some really complicated auto-tooling if you expect it to port any place. That sounds like a lot of work, and we haven't done one thing about actually, you know, in all that work about actually putting Windows on the screen and, you know, giving a user experience yet. Yeah.
One more thing, but in the list of languages you put on the screen, I think I missed about the one language that most people, most programmers actually know, because JavaScript. JavaScript is, of course, inherently based for the web, but it's actually coming to at least console applications with Node.js.
JavaScript isn't.
Issues like not being multi-threaded and so on, but the event-based model is actually working pretty decently, and I don't know whether I want to actually propose that.
Yeah, JavaScript is sort of the latest in a long line of languages of the month that are these very loose, dynamically typed languages with sort of very relaxed syntax and semantics. You know, if you look at Ruby, you look at Perl, you look at all of these things. And I did think about it. I put it in that other category. But you're right. It probably deserved its own mention as a thing to think about. I'm not against, you know, trying JavaScript as an application development language. Obviously, there's some things about it that make me suspicious. You just heard me say them. But at the very least, the fact that people are successfully developing web apps and now starting to develop mobile apps in Java and JavaScript and HTML5, sorry, means that it's possible. It's something that we should think about. And I think it would be interesting to think about what a JavaScript binding to X would even look like, right?
And it must look completely different because it must be completely event-driven because all the JavaScript engines that are out there at the moment, basically libv8, which you want to use, is inherently single-threaded.
Yeah.
And which sounds awful, but even you can even do really great server infrastructure with Node.js. I didn't think about that, but after I really worked on that myself, it really does work. Up to a certain scalability issues, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, you know, sort of how much the choice of JavaScript in the web community has been accidental and how much of it's been the result of, you know, sort of careful analysis. Remember, the sort of web script history is, first it was going to be all Java, and then they found out how hard it was to get Java applets to do the right thing, and then it was going to be JavaScript, and it mostly has. Now HTML5 is going to do a lot of the things that JavaScript did, and it's sort of hard to understand how much successful web development has been because of those technologies and how much of it's been in spite of those technologies. And I don't know the answer.
Okay, I have one comment, which is basically my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
So, in my opinion, the situation that Qt has with QML, JavaScript, and C++ has pretty nice balance that we could learn from.
I don't understand. So.
Do you know QML?
Yeah.
And you can do pretty impressive stuff with QML. Then you just add JavaScript for some stuff. If that's not enough, then you go C++. And it's pretty good balance there.
Yeah, I mean, it's at least something different to think about.
I don't want to write an application in 3 languages. Thank you.
So just a little bit from the KDE experience, I rebuilt parts in QML in about 2 or 3 hours, what I worked on several weeks before in C++. And that's the experience we have over the complete Plasma stack. We are currently completely rewriting everything in QML, which gives us a very, very decent user interface, which is extremely fast, which moves away all the problems we had with the C++ implementation, and it's all JavaScripty. It's the web language. And at my day job, I do web application, and I do the mock-ups for the web applications written in HTML5 and JavaScript in QML, because it's better, it's faster. I'm faster writing QML than JavaScript.
Yeah, interesting.
Actually, people will not give up C, C++, whether it's a JavaScript we have discussed. So there is a discussion about making browser itself a part of operating system. So if the browser itself replaces the remote desktop or your desktop part itself, so whatever we do, whether it's applet or ActiveOS control, so we need to concentrate in the replacing the desktop with the browser. That could be the right direction.
Okay.
And let the C or C++ run in a browser itself. What's the problem?
Well, there are problems, right? I mean, I agree. This is an approach people have tried to take, and they've been trying to take it literally as long as there's been browsers. I don't know how many of you remember Satan from about 1995. You know, the problem is that we should be able to make it easier to develop webs without desktop apps without, in principle, without a browser in the way than with, right? I mean, the browser makes things harder because now you have to deal with the limitations of the browser and its interfaces. In particular, you know, very interactive things are very hard to do right in a browser environment. The other problem is that the browser technology itself is a moving target. Another problem is that, you know, it requires a certain amount of large platform. I mean, we're seeing this. We're seeing it done a lot. It isn't like it's not doable. Is it the ultimate answer? I don't know. It's one of the possibilities for sure, though.
Also, in the near future, the people will like to play the online games on the remotely or like pay and then play the game. So for that kind of environment, we should think something like container where we can remotely, people can connect.
Yeah, I want to make it clear here. I guess I should have said that up front as a disclaimer. I think games, to my mind, and it's, you know, it's not like I don't build games, it's not like I don't like games, but games to my mind are outside the scope for this particular set of thoughts. I mean, games are going to do what games are going to do, and as little as I think there's any chance I'm going to influence what happens in the sort of practical application development, I think the chances I'm going to influence anything in the game world are 1/100th of that. I'd be satisfied if I could get the applications to get my work done.
I think a hybrid approach is something that's really useful because I don't think you're ever going to get one true language that is both fast to write and easy to learn and fast to run. And I think it's good to have one language for each thing, mix and match. So you originate in something that's quick to write and easy to learn, and then you take the hotspots and you turn them into a language that's fast. So you write it in Python and you change bits into C, or back in my old childhood, you do it in BBC Basic, and the bits you want fast, you move to R.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to the extent that your bottlenecks in application development are performance bottlenecks, that's absolutely right? I mean, the good news in 2012 is one of the things we don't have that we had even in 2008, is it's very hard to write, other than games, I mean, it's very hard to design an application where your big bottleneck is some kind of desktop performance bottleneck. Our desktops have gotten crazy. But you're right, in that situation you might move lower level. I guess what I would claim ultimately, though, is that there's some kind of multidimensional ROC curve for languages, and you at least don't want to pick a language that's... You certainly can always find languages that are worse along every dimension than some of these things. And that's what those languages at least I want to avoid.
So I hate to interrupt
Yeah,
this
of course.
discussion, but
gotta stop. I understand.
we have to watch the time.
Yep.
And so one more comment I think you wanted to say.
Well, one thing web applications still have advantage over desktop applications is I don't need to install anything. I can just go to the site and then just
Yeah.
I don't need to install an application. I don't. And it might be missing on the desktop side too.
Yeah, definitely packaging on the desktop side has been made a more interesting adventure than on the web or on mobile. You know, in mobile it's pretty clear what an APK should look like, or the iPhone equivalent, and you build that and all the tools are already there to build it because they know exactly what they're going to build. And similarly on the web, you know what your environment is, you know what your packaging looks like, and that by itself would be helpful. People don't think about sometimes how these development environments interact with the packaging system, so absolutely.
Okay, now very last one.
Throughout your talk and even later on, I feel that you completely sort of overlooked the QML development, because personally I've done some QML development and, well, is it loud enough? You should probably try building an app in QML. Because
yeah, QML is clearly one of the things I've learned today. I did know of QML, but I've never built anything in it. I don't know the user experience, and I've just been encouraged to give that a try. And yeah.
Because the GUI development is definitely very easy, fluid, and fast at the same time.
Good. Good.
Yep.
Well, maybe that's
But
the future.
But then I do like Keith's point. You probably don't want to develop apps in 3 languages, C, C++, C++, Java, and QML. But it's definitely very easy and easy to package for a cross-platform application.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah, I was glad to get those recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Bart.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for bridging the short power outage.
No problem.
Power outage was kind of scary because it didn't only affect this room, not only this building, but apparently the entire block here.
Oh, nice. Thanks.